Good morning and happy Sunday. Happy Memorial Day. Peeing out of here. So as we begin this morning, always, I just want to say that I am grateful. I am grateful for each and every one of us here. I'm grateful for this Science of Mind teaching and for this Open Door Center for Spiritual Living that we have together created. I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to come together on Sundays and to connect, to learn, to grow, to love, and to take all of that and move toward making a world that is working better for each and every one of us, just as Carol mentioned. Not just the two-legged, the humanoids, if you will, or the whatever we're called, human race, mankind, humankind, but for every single one. I went out last night to draw some water for my garden, and I found this thing. I actually had to get Mike to come and look at it. It was pink, the color of Beverly's beautiful top there, and black striped. And Mike came out and looked at it, and he said, "That's a millipede." So it had 1,000,000 legs, not just 2 or 4 or whatever, okay? Yes, and I put it back where it had been after looking at it. It had spines, too. I didn't really want to play with it too much, so, but we understand that when we move from a place of mindfulness, from a place of a greater consciousness, we truly change the world we're living in and make it better for every one of us. So I'm just grateful that we get to do that together on Sundays. Thank you for being here. It is Memorial Day weekend. It is a holiday. It is a holy day in my way of thinking. This holiday started back in 1868 or sometime around there, or was proclaimed a holiday in 1868 by Captain John Logan. It's an interesting event in that there are a lot of places in the United States that claim to be the founding birthplace of Memorial Day or Decoration Day. And it was, of course, started in recognition of those who had fallen during the Civil War. But, of course, that has been broadened to include anyone and everyone who has gone to service for our world to keep us free and did not return. Before we step into our message this morning, let us just take a moment of silence together and offer that in any way you would like to for those who did leave home, leave hearth, and not come back, at least not physically. So we say thank you. We recognize that those that made that choice, though it might not have been conscious, carried through with an act that truly has a tremendous bearing on our ability to be in a free world, to be here today. One of the things that I am coherently aware of with us as part of Centers for Spiritual Living, with the greater expression of our teaching, our Science of Mind philosophy, is that when a determination was made about what to call this several years ago in the history of our organization and our teaching, they chose to not utilize the word church, because in all too many countries today, that word and that practice is owned by the government. That's as true just as close as our near neighbor Mexico, where the government religion is Catholicism, and you are told what you will believe and worship. Because of people who are not with us today, we have the freedom to believe as we choose. And I believe that we believe in this teaching in a way that really expands on all of the things that we've been told heretofore. So we say thank you to all of those folks. Do we have anyone with us today who has served in the armed forces or had family who went to battle and did not come back? If so, stand up, please, and just let us say thank you to you. You served, you lost something, you gave something. What you gave was huge. May we never forget it. Let's give her and everyone a round of applause. Love you guys. That's what I call willing to go to any length. So it isn't just getting up at 4 o'clock to be here by 9 o'clock or whatever time I roll in on Sundays. So that's wonderful. So this morning we're continuing. As you know, the last couple of weeks we've been turning our sights toward the study of prayer. And what we have found is that when we consider prayer, it's really important to think about what it is, coherently and consciously, mindfully, to think about what it is that we believe about God. Because so often we find that those beliefs have a huge amount to do with how we believe, how the ways that we will choose to pray and what we believe about that prayer. As we move into this, there was a homework assignment last week. The encouragement was to do a little writing, to do a little journaling in the morning about gratitude, things you were grateful for, and then also things that you have gratitude for that you are looking to create in your life, looking to bring into manifestation, into form, and writing and holding that gratitude from the position of knowing it's already been done. It's here in form. It's mine now. That, if you will recall last week, is a part of what we looked at and called feeling prayer. And that's huge. It's literally to sit in the awareness that wholeness that we desire, that financial wellness that we wish to see, that connection with other individuals that we hope to achieve is already a done deal. Did anyone take that suggestion and walk with it and do a little homework? And if so, would you like to share about that? Okay, I'll share mine. I love you guys. So what are we doing tons of feeling prayer here? And that really, to me, that is what the end result of Joe Dispenza's whole class is about. Okay? That's really what he's talking about. Is stepping into prayer and knowing it and claiming it. To me, that's one of the things that makes our way of praying in Science of Mind so different from what we see taught in most mainstream cultures and philosophies. But I did a little feeling prayer this week. And this is not something that is new to me. About close to a year ago, Katie and I took a class at the Center for Spiritual Living Asheville that was based on the book, the class was based on the book, the current book, The Path of Wealth by May McCarthy. Now, in that path, May outlines, May is an over and over achiever, if you will. She has built several $million businesses from the ground up, okay? And she has used her 7-step recipe that she outlines in that book to do this. And a big piece of what she suggests is sit down in the morning and write, I'm so grateful for not just the stuff you've got, but the things you want to see in form. So those better relationships, or perhaps that perfect love relationship. I have used techniques like this to create the love of my life that I'm currently involved with. Okay, my current practice has been to sit with myself and work with a situation that I have been dealing with now for about 10 years. This was where I took on essentially, I'm going to use this word and I don't use it very often, a debt, okay, a loan for to achieve something for a family member that was a pretty significant situation. It needed to happen then, and I needed access to some funds to make that happen. So I took out a note, all is well and good, family member's great, I'm great. Now, of course, what happens is I get to pay that note back, and of course it's with interest. So for the last, 7 or 8 years, I've been making a monthly payment on that. Fortunately, through a lot of wonderful situations in my life, a lot of high income, I've been able the last year or so to pay them a lot more than just the monthly payment. And I'm now at a point where I can see the light at the end of that tunnel. I can actually see and name a time, if things continue the way I anticipate, that will be completely repaid in full, okay? So every morning what I do is I sit down and I write, I am so happy and grateful that this loan, is paid in full, that it's zeroed out. And I not only sit there and I write that, It's a done deal. But I imagine myself doing the happy dance, okay? You have not seen anybody dance like that in a long time, okay? So I see myself scaring the tar out of all four cats. They'll just go upstairs. She's having a moment. Let's get out of the way, okay? You know, and it's fabulous. I make these payments electronically, so I see myself sitting in my laptop in my living room, sending them the last frickin' payment, goodbye and good riddance. No, and you know what? Thank you very much. Because when I took that loan out, I needed that money. I was heaven bent on making sure that I was able to finance the situation that had come about, okay? And you know, to me it was kind of a surprise that I actually, you know, was approved, but it happened, okay? Those people have been good to me. They gave me the money ahead of time. The folks that give you your electricity or your propane or your food very often do that and don't expect remuneration until the very end of the month. That's really pretty cool, okay? That's a great reason to say thank you when you're putting the stamps on the checks and putting things in the mail. In case you don't know, this is my youngest daughter, Laurel, and her friend Brett. Thank you. We're glad you're here. So you're so cute. Oh, excuse me. We'll have a moment. But you know, but you get to see me. I get to see me and feel me happy dancing all around my living room. Okay, every single morning. And you know what? That's going to be paid by the end of 2017 on the calendar. But what I would tell you is that in doing that every morning, it will get paid a lot faster. Because anytime we hold something like that in consciousness, what happens is that the universe steps up and steps forward and agrees with us. Okay? And money comes out of nowhere. Okay? And things happen that you would never believe could happen. Because why? We begin to believe. And that is what it is all about. So I did my feeling prayer homework, okay? We'll see if you do the homework this coming week, okay? In Science of Mind, we have a crazy name for prayer. We call it spiritual mind treatment. I didn't make that name up. If Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, was alive, I would probably have to have a conversation with him, because many people have come to me in foundations class or in other things we taught here, and they have said, I don't like that name. I don't like the word treatment. Well, I don't care for it either, because it doesn't make any, people are like, what's that, So often I think of it as intentional prayer or effective prayer. I have been told by the stories and the people who were around Ernest at the time that Science of Mind was kind of in the works and Ernest was alive, that he selected that word very coherently and consciously. He wanted people to understand that prayer has the same potential that a treatment that a medical provider might provide to someone. He wanted folks to understand you don't just have this one route, okay? There are many routes to what we want to achieve, and they are all powerful. And one of those powerful methodologies is prayer or spiritual mind treatment. He wanted people to get that. And so he used the word treatment so it would be a little beyond the conscious understanding of many of us. Okay? It's interesting, though, believing that prayer is as powerful as a pill or a potion or a plaster. That's a phrase that Ernest used a lot. Believing that prayer is just as powerful as those is one thing theoretically, and it's a whole different thing to live it. I can't tell you how many times I have seen folks come in our 1 Minute Miracle and ask for prayer, especially for something that might be a medical issue, and turn away and walk up to somebody and say, my back still really hurts, or my headache just hasn't gone away. We get enculturated into living the condition and believing in it, okay? Because it's a form thing. It's a density kind of thing, okay? it's very hard to break that consciousness. And so, we'll look at different ways to do that in our class, in our You Are the Placebo class. Some things that Ernest Holmes said about prayer that I think are interesting, okay? Statements that I have collected. He tells us in the first chapter of the Science of Mind text, it is that our idea of prayer changes as our understanding of God changes. Our beliefs about God are huge when we relate them to prayer. And the reason for that is that prayer becomes the substratum through which we tender, or our beliefs about God become the substratum through which we tender our prayer. Okay? What we believe about God will form that prayer. Remember last week we looked at different kinds of prayer. We talked about types of prayer that have to do where we are beseeching or begging God. Okay? Those essentially embody the diagram on this slide. You've seen this one before. God and I are not related. God is over there. God is up there. God is off somewhere else. And I'm over here by my little weird self. Okay? And I have to beseech and beg and ask and supplicate and be humble. Okay? We don't quite live there anymore. Okay? When we pray, when we change what we think about God and about prayer, we change our understanding from this to the next slide, which is essentially that we begin to understand that our awareness is as part of all of creation. There isn't any way that everything that came about as a result of spirit creating from itself into form, there isn't any way that any of those forms could be separate from one another. Yet again, that's a very hard concept when we look at the fact that we're all walking around in these things. I like to refer to them as meat suits, okay? And I got my meat suit here, and you got your meat suit there, and never the two shall meet, right? Unless we decide, that they should, okay? Let's see the next slide, okay? We go from an understanding of God as a being, God as a noun, to God as all of consciousness. And so in this diagram, everything in the box is essentially everything that is. You're in there, and I'm in there, and the planet Earth is in there, and Mars is in there. And Katie was telling me last night she went to Cullowhee and looked through the, telescope thing, okay, is it Jupiter that has the rings? One of our friends online, Enrique Gomez, had gone up to Cullowhee Mountain and set up his telescopes. He teaches astronomy or something. And so he was up there teaching people about the heavens last night. But everything is there. We go from God as something in the sky, a power above us, a power that excludes us, to being essentially the expression of all creation. We begin to recognize that in the very beginning, if we go all the way back to Genesis and that story in the Bible about how before there was anything there was God, what could God have created from but itself if there was only God? Okay? So God rolled forward and became stuff. And what that means essentially is that the teachings of quantum science that are just being revealed today are totally accurate in that whatever it is, whether it's form or the unformed, it is made up of essence. That essence is consciousness. On some level, all of the atoms that are the chairs that you are sitting in agreed to come together and be an atom and be a chair. I don't know how, okay? I don't get that part at all, but I get that that makes a lot of sense to me, okay? We begin to realize in this process that prayer is not an act of overcoming the reluctance of a ticked-off being, a ticked-off deity, but it is an act of acceptance of the very best that the world has to offer, an acceptance of God's highest ideas, not only for us, but of us. That's huge, okay? That's a huge difference in this science of mind teaching in mainstream philosophies. We understand that what prayer does is it connects our minds with the universal mind And Ernest loved to capitalize words. When you read the Science of Mind text, you see that everywhere. He kind of would get on a honk with it, I think, okay? He capitalized universal mind. Prayer connects our minds with the universal mind and thus allows our consciousness to move, to shift. Ernest was very often quoted as saying the answer to prayer is in the prayer. How could that be? And yet it makes great sense when we understand that prayer isn't asking something to do something or be something. Prayer is the statement of manifestation of what we want to see happen. And our prayer fulfilled can only be what we embody. So if I pray for $1 million but have no belief that that will ever show up in my world, what am I going to get? I'm not going to get $1 million. I'm not going to get what I want. I'm not even going to get what I deserve, which might be, like, I don't know, $250,000 or something, right? Okay? Or 20,000 million or something, right? Let's go in that direction, okay? I'm going to get what I am. I'm going to get what I am. And if what I am is a lack of belief that that can be made manifest, it won't happen, okay? It won't happen. Spiritual Mind's treatment in Science of Mind has 5 steps. The first of these, very succinctly, is very simple. It's that God is all there is. And that just absolutely messes with people's minds to no end. Okay? We understand, again, here that whatever was created, created from itself. Okay? So everything that is has body, has expression as God consciousness. Okay? We see here that there is consciousness everywhere, and that it's just really a degree of consciousness that is present. And that might fluctuate. I love what Katie said in her meditation about mindfulness and how, it's very easy when you go to Walmart and somebody boots in front of you. Sorry, I got hairs that are going crazy here. To have an attitude toward them. But then what do? You think, don't think that way. Let me shift my consciousness from calling the person who cut in front of me on the freeway an SOB to recognizing they're, an expression of the divine. And realistically, maybe they're having a bad day. Hey, maybe they're on the way to the hospital because somebody's getting ready to leave and they want to get there before that happens. Maybe they're having, a moment because the person in the passenger seat next to them is getting ready to give birth to one of us and they want to get to that hospital right now. They don't want to be handling no mess like that in the front seat of their car, okay? Hello, okay? Gross, okay? We get it that if God is pure consciousness, remember, another term for consciousness is simply awareness. If God is pure awareness, God is not just the holier-than-thou elevated consciousness, enlightened awareness. God is all of consciousness. Even the dense, even the gross, even the unspeakable. Oh my. If God is all there is, then how shall we address things like the Holocaust? What about the negative stuff that we see on the news every day? I mean, it's amazing. It's just incredible. Okay? How do we look at things like that and resolve them? A couple of years ago, out in Aurora, Colorado, a guy walked into a movie theater and he cut down, I think 10 people died in that. One of those individuals was Rebecca Wingo. Rebecca was a mother of 2 and a member of the New Dawn Center for Spiritual Living. How do we deal with this, guys? Here's my answer. And let me say that in thinking about this and thinking about how I can grab this on an ever deeper level, I went to my minister's listserv because I don't have to, me have all the answers, hello, okay? Some days I can't find the toilet paper, It's just kind of like that in this expression that I'm working with these days, okay? It's all good. It just is the way it is. And so I said to my minister friends, how do you teach that God is all there is? How do you resolve that when we see things like, Hitler and Charles Manson? And I don't even have TV anymore like people have it. I turned on my AOL account and the other day, and the first thing I get is this face of this battered infant whose babysitter beat him up while his parents were gone. I'm like, I want to choke you. Okay? How do I resolve my desire to choke somebody that does things like that? Well, let's just look at this first and foremost. Okay? That there are no easy answers. That mankind, humankind, has been looking at this and struggling with this forever. Okay? And maybe we are getting a little more informed than we used to be. And maybe all of us, probably most of us, will leave the physical expression still asking this question. And that's not a bad thing. Okay? Because the hardest questions to ask are the scariest ones to ask. Sometimes we don't want to know what the answers are, because they cut through in places and leave us with even more questions and even less, assurance. Okay? One of my colleagues wanted me to say to you, in considering this question, that anytime we begin to look at what God is, we really are in possession of an undaunted soul. Something within us that just wants to know more. And that is a courageous, place to come from. It might be scary, but it's also very courageous. Okay? These are big questions. We talked a couple of weeks ago, or in the last 2 weeks really, about where our ideas about God come from. And you'll recall that we identified a couple of things. One is, of course, our earliest childhood teachings. The things that we were taught in nursery school or by our parents or Sunday school. I grew up in the Catholic faith. I got to go to Mass every freaking day most of my life until I was in like 7th grade or something. Okay? We won't paint that good or bad. It just was, okay? Today I could, we could wax comedian here, but we won't. Okay? It was what it was. But, those teachings stay with us. There's another silo or arena that I think a lot of our ideas come from. We talked about that too. And that is what we call race consciousness. That is the collective unconscious of the species. Okay? So all of the thoughts, all of the ideas, all of the actions, everything that has ever happened or that is currently happening, all of that is right there. Okay? And all of that, if we truly are connected with that divine mind, with that collective unconscious, then some of that is rippling into our belief system all the time. If you don't believe me, if you don't believe that consciousness has its effect, think about what it's like to walk into the mall on December 24th when everyone who is in there is just stupid beyond belief with trying to find the perfect present for Grandma, okay? Or Uncle Harry or whatever. You can feel the craziness, can't you? You can sense it in the air. That's kind of like a level of awareness that's there. Okay? I also believe there's a third area where we have really strong takeaways about our ideas of God. And that is our own personal life experience. Okay? It's all too easy. If I am 5 years old and my mother dies, it's all too easy for me to say, God took my mother away from me, than it is to say, for some reason I decided to incarnate in this lifetime and have this experience of losing my parent, my beloved mother, at a very early age. What the heck would I do that for? Okay? Well, maybe it is all about evolving, okay, and growing. And maybe we do, just as some of our metaphysical teachings would lay out before us, maybe we do kind of select the script before we ever inhabit the body. That's a sometimes a very far off belief, but it's, it's possible, okay? So we get it, okay, that there are many areas, okay, that our ideas about God can come from. Why do we see then things that happen that, we want to look at as not being of God? Well, I think a big piece of it is this, that we have that idea somewhere embedded from childhood, from our experiences, or even from the collective unconscious, that God has to be about good. Said who? Said what literature? Because all of it was human-made. It might have been divinely inspired. It probably was. But all of it was written by people. Okay? And so we find that we really have to step out there and allow whatever it is to begin to tell us what it is. To me, I like this idea about consciousness. It works for me much more than anything else I've ever found. Another idea that came to me about why things happen that just seem to be unconscionable came from a minister friend of mine who said that it is his understanding that we are, how can I say this, developmentally moving along a spectrum of growth as a species. So think about applying a developmental model. Now that would be the same kind of model that says when a child is born it cannot walk. At age 1 it probably can. At age 3 it can, recognize its mother's vehicle in a parking lot. Okay? At age 5 it's capable of probably reading and things like that. Okay? We come in as little human beings and we develop along a model. Okay? And we continue that development until we get to be old people and croak, or croak before then, if we croak early, however that works. Okay? That's a developmental model. What this minister went on to say was that when he looked at things like the Holocaust, it made sense to him to understand that as a species, humankind is very young. We'd be goofy. At times we'd be stupid. We make mistakes in order to learn from them. And we do that collectively as a species. This person went on to say, and to me it was a very powerful awareness, that the phenomenon of the situation that we think about when we talk about Hitler and the Holocaust was an expression of group mass consciousness. Okay? So that doesn't make him bad. It means every one of us has an aspect of that consciousness that we carry. Okay? We've all heard, yes, anybody is capable of murder. I didn't know that about me until, I don't know, I was probably in my 20s, or maybe in my 30s, and I realized you could, yeah, you could. And you know how to, too, honey. You would come up with a way, okay? Doesn't mean I'm going to act on that, okay? And that segues kind of into another arena, and that is that every single one of us comes in, and God conscious, regardless of the level of density that we might be at, we have free will. We can make choices about what we will do, okay? We can make choices about how we will live, and God doesn't get in the way of those choices, okay? By its very definition, free will is the power of acting without the constraint of necessity or fate, meaning some outcome is not what we, use in determining what we're going to do, okay? Free will is also the ability to act at one's own discretion, okay? Ernest Holmes said this about freedom and about what kind of, how would it work if God sent us here and only let us choose appropriate or good behaviors. He called that a freedom under compulsion. And what he said was a freedom under compulsion would amount to the worst kind of bondage. If there had been a way by which the divine creative principle, that's God, okay, just another term for Ernest, if there had been a way by which the divine creative principle could have compelled us to suddenly appear on the scene of experience fully orbed with all our freedom and still be an individual, then it would have been done. But even God could not do this. The only way God can evolve a spontaneous individual is to set the person alone and allow that person to awaken to himself, to become aware that his choices not only affect him or her, but perhaps the entire world. From the Bible, we get the phrase, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." Most world religions will tell you they believe in God, and they also believe that we have the opportunity to say yes to any degree or completely no. Okay? Not at all. We have that choice. We have that complete free will. So perhaps in his writings, Neale Donald Walsch was right. You remember that Neale Donald Walsch was the guy who wrote all the Conversations with God books. And the impetus for that was that he was quite a colorful person. He was a philanderer, and he was like hooting around on his wife, okay, and behaving in all kinds of interesting ways, things that we don't find socially appropriate most of the time in this culture, okay, or often in this culture, I should say, okay. So he was colorful. He was doing things that, he kind of probably had some behaviors around and some guilt around, some different feelings around. He had an accident, and then he couldn't work. He messed his neck up real bad, okay. I think he was looking at a woman when he had the car accident that he had. That's the way it's portrayed on his movie. At least, doing this and gawking and got slammed, pretty hard by somebody else. Ended up with his neck in one of those lovely little neck thingies, okay, holsters, whatever you call it, okay. Couldn't work, lost his job. Wife said she had enough of it, kicked him out, took the kids. He ended up homeless. He ended up living on the street, okay. And over a period of time, what he saw was there were really amazing people, wonderful people who were homeless, okay. There were also a lot of people who, weren't behaving very well, okay. He managed to get his health back to some degree. He managed to get a job. He managed to get an apartment. Then he managed to buy some furniture. Then he managed to get a vehicle, okay. Then he managed to get it back together. And all the while, he's having conversations just like we've had, okay, when we've said, how could God allow this? Why could this happen? If you want to know the rest, read Conversations with God. There's like 25 of them out there now. He's just kept going once he got on a roll, okay? He just kept writing books. He also, by the way, stumbled into a Science of Mind church in the Pacific Northwest, okay? And I think that has a lot to do with what he relates in that book. At one of his talks, somebody said to him, I think you're crazy. I don't think you could sum God up in 5 words. I challenge you to do just that. And so Neale Donald Walsch's answer was, this is what God would say to that. You've got me all wrong. End of statement. Okay? God is all there is. And that's what he says in Conversations with God, too. You just got to read the book and find the places where he speaks that. Perhaps it's true, too, what Wayne Dyer has said. Perhaps it was really on the money when he said, when we change the way that we look at things, the things that we look at will change before our very eyes. Our health can change. Our lives can change. Our monetary status can change. Our things that we used to call debts can go away. Okay? They will. It's phenomenal. Okay? Perhaps our job here on earth is not to come in, live one simple little life, get it done with, be holier than thou, and go to heaven, or hell if we ain't good. You know where I'm going. If that's the model, I'm like in a whole lot of trouble, okay? But perhaps it isn't. Perhaps it's more in alignment with what the Jewish mystics teach when they refer to as tikkun olam, Tikkun Olam is the understanding that we come here to be co-creators with the divine in repairing this world, in bringing a higher state of consciousness to every room that we walk into, to every conversation we have, to every heart that we touch. What do you think? I like it. Okay, it works better for me than others do. So we're going to continue next week with our study of prayer, and we're going to look at the second step of spiritual mind treatment. That's even scarier than the first. God is all there is. I am God. Okay? And so are you, and so is everything, and so is Hitler, and so is Charlie Manson, and so is the person who beat that little baby. Okay? So is that twerp who stole your parking space. It's all God. Your homework assignment, if you choose to, take this in, okay, is to continue to work with the concept that God is all there is. Are you up for it? All right. Happy Sunday. I love you guys. Thank you.